Hi, welcome back to Manohar Academy. In this lesson, we are going to learn about a very important concept called inheritance. So when we are talking about inheritance, we are talking about creating new classes from other existing classes. So let's see the need for inheritance. Let's say in Manohar Academy, we have employees who teach and students who are taught. So we have students and employees. So when I create a class for students, it will have first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, gender, and admission number. So each student will have admission number and these personal details. Also, my employees will have these personal details, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, gender, and they will have employee number and the salary I pay. So if you see here, the student class and employee class, they look almost similar, except the student has a admission number and employee has employee number and salary. So if we think further and see why they have the same fields, that is because these are the personal details of the student. These are the personal details of the employee. So basically student is a person, employee is also a person. So that is the reason they have the same fields and same methods, something like getAge. So we can create a new class called person and we can move all these fields to the person. So because these are personal details, so they properly belong to a class called person. And we can say student is a person and employee is a person. So how do we do that? I mean, if we are having this duplication here, then obviously we are violating the drive principle, and if we have to change something, then we have to change at multiple places, and that's not where we want to be. So as we said, let's create a new class called person, then let's create student and employee saying they are persons. So if we see here, I am creating a class called person. So this person has first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, gender, and the method that we have seen previously. So now I can say I can create the student class, that is the new class from the existing class. The way we say the student is a person in Java is saying student extends person. So student has something else from the person, but he is a person. Also similarly, we can create the class employee by extending person. So what happens is, when the student extends person, whatever is there in the person class, they will be inherited by the subclass. So now we can say the student has first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, gender, and a method to get the age. That is all done by simply extending the person class. But here make sure whenever you are extending a class, the particular statement is true. The statement is student is a person. If that is not the case, you should not extend from other class. So to extend or to inheritance to work, we need to make sure that relationship between the classes is a relationship. That is nothing but student is a person, employee is a person. Okay, so after extending, what we do is whatever is specific to the new class, in this case the student class, we will define those fields and methods also. So here the setters and getters for the admission number will be there. Similarly, in the employee class, we are defining employee number and salary and the required getters and setters. So this is how we create new classes from existing classes through inheritance or by inheritance. So any number of classes can extend an existing class. For example, here we are seeing two classes, that is student and employee. They are extending the person class. So that is true. So in the next slide, or in this particular slide, we are going to see what happens when you extend. We already mentioned that now because student is extending the person, student is going to have the first name, last name, and all those fields and all those methods which are available in the person class. So now here I am just creating a student class and I am setting the date of birth for this particular student. But if you see here, there is no date of birth in the student class. It is inherited from the person class. Similarly, I can call student.getAge. Again, the getAge is inherited from person by student. Okay, so that is how inheritance works. Whenever you extend and whenever you create a new class from an existing class, by extending, you are going to inherit all the fields and all the methods that are available in the superclass. So here the student is subclass and the person is superclass. So whatever class we are extending here, the person is a superclass and student is subclass. So when we say super and sub, we feel like super is more and sub is less. But here if you see, student has more features. Student has everything that is available from the person, and he also has extra fields like admission number. So generally, I mean, it may seem like student is super class because he has more functionality or more fields, and person should be subclass, but that is not the true. Because if we have 1,000 persons, 100 of them may be students. So we have 1,000 persons and 100 students. So in that way, or other way of saying, I mean, let's not take outside persons, but let's say we have 200 persons. Out of them, 100 are students, 100 are employees. We can see that in the previous in this slide, person is extended by student and person is also extended by employee. So if we have 200 persons, let's say 100 of them is students, 100 of them are employees. So obviously the person is superclass or superset, which is containing the subsets students and employees. So that is the reason we are calling person as superclass and student and employee as subclasses or subsets of persons. Okay. For the superclass, there are two other names, that is parent class and base class. Because subclass is inheriting from the superclass, the relationship is inheritance. So in real life, childs or children inherit the assets or the properties from the parents. So here the analogy works. So superclass is also called parent class and subclass is called child class. And because this is kind of base class from which we are deriving the new classes, superclass can also be called base class and subclass can be derived class. We are deriving the new class, that is subclass, from the parent class or the superclass. So these are the other names for the superclass and subclass. Next, we already mentioned that subclass inherits all the members, that are member fields and member methods, from the superclass. But as we have said in the class design module, the constructors and initialization blocks, they are not members. So they won't be inherited. So remember, I mean, we are not inheriting constructors, we are not inheriting initialization blocks, we are only inheriting fields and methods from the superclass. Also, the thing is, when we were designing classes, we said whenever something is private, it is not accessible from outside the class. That is true even in case of inheritance. We cannot directly access private fields and methods of the superclass inside the subclass. What do we mean by that? We have, in our case, the subclass is student and superclass is person. So in the student class, we cannot directly access the first name, last name, middle name, whatever those private fields of the superclass. We can't directly access them. We have to use the public methods that are provided by the superclass. So if you see here, I cannot set student dot date of birth equal to so and so, because of course I think I am outside the class. Let's see that in the IDE what we mean by saying the private fields or methods, private methods are not directly accessible. So let's go to IDE and let's see. Also, we are going to create the three classes, that is person, student and employee. Let's get started in the IDE. So here I created a new package called instance. So it is com.manoharacademy.corejava.inheritance. So I'm going to create a new class called person first. Okay. This person has first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, gender, and also we are going to write a method to get the age. This method is going to be public. It is going to return a integer value. Based on the date of birth, we can return the age, but I am just returning a constant value 15. That should be fine. So now let's create the getters and setters. So that we can access these fields outside the class. Okay, we have the person class. Good. Now let's create the new class called student. Okay, now the student extends the person. So student is created from person. So the student is going to have a private field called registration number or admission number. Let's create the getters and setters. Let's create the other class called employee. The employee is also going to have admission number. Student has admission number, but employee has employee number. And he has salary. We have to pay 2 employees. Okay, let's create the getters and setters. Okay, now let's create a test class so that we can test whether what we can have, what we can't have. Okay. I'm creating a main method here and I'm going to create student object. Okay, here we have the student class and here we created the student object. So first I can set first name. So his first name is Nagachandra, let's say. And then I can set his date of birth. Okay, we have set the date of birth. So let's do the same thing with employee. We're creating new employee object and we will set his first name and date of birth. Okay, so here I am not getting any set first name, set first name, set last name, because I did not extend employee from person. So let's do that. Okay, now the employee is extending person. So now I can have set first name, okay, it's taking a bit of time. Okay, let's set the employee first name. And his date of birth. Okay, also for the student we can set admission number. For employee we can set employee number. Also let's set the salary for okay. So we have the student, we have employee, and student has inherited so many things like first name, date of birth, so many things from the person, also the employee. And student has its own attribute or its own fields like admission number, and employee has his own fields like employee number and salary, which are not available in the person class. So that is how we can reuse or we can use the inheritance to create a superclass, and from that class extend the required functionality. In this way, the student and person, both the student as well as person, both are using the functionality available in the person. This is working because student is a person and employee is a person. If student is not person, we should not use this extends keyword, or we should not use inheritance. Also, if the employee is not person, we should not use that. But next thing is, employee can extend only one class, or any class like employee, it can extend from only one superclass. You cannot write something like this. So you cannot extend or you cannot create a new class from two different classes. I don't know why it's saying that particular error message, but we can't do that. Let me create another class. Called professor. Let's say the professor extends from person. Also, he is an employee. Can I do that? I can't do that because professor cannot be, a new class cannot be derived from two different classes. So this is called multiple inheritance. Like you are inheriting from different classes, and you can't do that in Java. In some languages like C++, you can do that. The multiple inheritance is allowed there, but in Java it is not allowed. So either you can extend from employee, which is fine, or you can extend from person. That is also fine. Actually, because employee is person, so when you are extending from employee, basically you are also extending from person. So here the relationship is from person, we extend it to employee, from employee we created professor. So this is called inheritance hierarchy or inheritance path of inheritance. So we created a class called employee from person, and professor is created from employee. This is allowed. Okay, so there is no problem with this one. And this professor is going to have all the methods from the person, because employee has all the methods and fields from the person. So let's check this one also. The professor doesn't have anything new. He is having everything the employee is having. So I can do everything I can do with employee on the professor as well. So I can set the first name of the professor, I can set the date of birth of the professor, employee number for the professor, and salary. Okay, this is allowed. So I have also shown you inheriting from a derived class itself. Okay, so we are good here. So this is understandable. This is easy to understand. And now the other thing, in student class, for example, I want to write a method called public boolean and the method name is major. So if he is more than 21 years old, then I'm going to say yes, he is major, otherwise false. Let's say true for now to get rid of this error. Okay, now here let's say anyone who is born after 1970. Okay, now because student is extending from person and person has date of birth, so let me copy that. Can I use that? Because student is, we know that student is inheriting everything from the person. So person has date of birth. Can we access the date of birth directly in the student class? Because student is inheriting everything, right? And we were able to see that we are able to set the date of birth for the student. So obviously the student has a date of birth. So can we access the date of birth directly in student class? We can't do that. If you see here, the date of birth has private access in person. So the student is not accessible, even though it is inherited, or even though it is there, it cannot be accessed in the student class. So to do that, what we need to do is we have to call the public method, that is get date of birth. So we can do that. Okay, so that is what we meant. The private members, that is private methods, private fields in the superclass are not directly accessible in the subclass, because they are private, they are not accessible outside. Even though we are inheriting, they are not accessible. They are accessible only inside the class in which they are defined, that is person. Okay, that is what we meant. Okay, private fields, they can't be accessed directly. Okay, so we covered everything that we mentioned in the slide, right? So let's go to slide once again. Let's see the need for inheritance. We have student is a person, employee is a person, so we can create the person class first, and from the person we can extend the student and employee. They're called superclass and subclass because every student is a person, every employee is a person, but not other way around. Every person is not student. So that is there, and whenever we inherit all the fields and member methods from the superclass. Here we can see we can call the set date of birth to set the date of birth of the student, which is inherited from the person. Also we can call the public methods like get age to find the age of the student. Same is true for employee class. So the superclass and subclass, they have different names. Superclass can be called parent class and base class because that's how it works, and subclass can also be called child class or derived class. And we know this is a very important thing, that subclass is inheriting all the members from the superclass, and constructors and initialization blocks, they are not inherited because they are not members. Also, the very important thing is, even though we are inheriting things like fields and members, we cannot access directly the private fields and methods. We have to use the public methods, something like get age or get date of birth. So those public methods should be used in the subclass in order to access the fields, the private fields available in the superclass. So that is all from this class. Now we are in a good shape to further explore the inheritance. Thank you. Last but not least, if you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and subscribe so that you will get notifications whenever I upload something new and ready for you to learn. Also, if you are benefited from this video, make sure you share it with your friends, also like it, so that your friends can also watch, they can also learn. That is all from this lesson. See you in the next lesson.